Okay. Good morning, everyone. Let's start our broadcast with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Bless us with ever deeper awareness of the true and single purpose of our lives, which is to love God in one another. Give us the clarity and the courage to fulfill this simple destiny. Om. Peace. Amen. Dear friends, today is going to be a different day because it's a milestone day. Last night at 5:20 p.m. California time, Nayaswami Seva left her body. Seva, along with Jyotish and Swami, are really the founders of Ananda. There are other founding members, a small coterie, Jaya, Devi, Binay. I don't want to, Satya, I can make a list. But Seva with Jyotish was Swami's right and left hand. If you look in the original edition of the Path, there it is, Swami, my right and left hand, Seva and Jyotish, who really made it happen. Both Seva and Jyotish knew Swamiji in San Francisco before Ananda started. It's a history that is as long as our spiritual lives. I, myself, my first 10 years at Ananda, Seva and I were constant companions, and I would not have survived if it hadn't been for her friendship. After that, life took us farther apart physically, but never farther apart in our hearts. So last night, she's 12 years older than I, which makes her the same age that Swami was when he passed, which was 86. You wouldn't have known it to see her. She was spry and bright and capable and constant right up to the very last, literally. It was a Sunday yesterday, and she had a monthly responsibility, as I'm told, to work at what's called the Shrine of the Masters at Crystal Hermitage. She always, except for a few years, she always lived at Ananda Village. And in 1971, when she moved from the meditation retreat, the seclusion retreat, to the land that's called Ayodhya, where Swami's Crystal Hermitage is now, she put a little green trailer on this certain spot, and that she lived in that spot all the years that she lived at the village, except for about 3 years when she was on other assignments. And the little trailer, which was these tiny, I don't know how many feet they would be, 20 feet, maybe at the most 15. The little green trailer, and then after a time she built a tiny cottage on the side of the trailer, and then the door opened into the cottage. And then eventually she built the rest of the cottage and took the trailer away. But she was always on that exact spot. And the Shrine of the Masters was downhill, down a fairly steep hill. So at the end of the day, yesterday, she finished her assignments at the Shrine of the Masters. She walked up the hill. She walked into her cottage. I don't know if her friend Gloria was with her at the moment or not. She got to the cottage and she said, I feel a little out of breath. And Gloria turned to get her a glass of water. Gloria has been her dearest friend for many decades. And was getting her a glass of water. Seva lost consciousness, and seemingly her heart stopped and she left. It couldn't have been better. And Dr. Peter and Patricia were nearby, and Dr. Peter came over and he made some effort to revive her, because as a doctor he knows often it's not uncommon for someone's heart to stop and then for it to start again. So he wanted to give her every opportunity to make a decision. And then paramedics came, and as it happens wonderfully, one of the paramedics assigned to our district happens to be the son of one of our longtime members. So Christian Morehouse, who Seva has known since before he was born, was there, and Dr. Peter trying to invite her back into her body. My own personal picture of that is that I can see Seva. She had this way of, I can't imitate it exactly, but she would just sort of tease like this. And I can sort of see her in her astral body just kind of shaking her finger in a good-natured way at all their efforts to get her back into that body. Her seeing Swamiji, seeing all the masters, just sort of like, you think I'm going to come back? It's nice of you to try, but not a chance. And so her heart stopped, and that was it. She was out of that body. She gave it everything she had up to the very last moment. And you can't think of a more glorious way to die. Master himself said, I'm going to die with a heart attack. That's the easiest way to die. And so Master said to Seva, oh, you've done enough. I'll just take you now. Of course, there's a certain sadness. Master himself wept at Sister Gyanamata's funeral. See, now tears are coming. I haven't had any tears at all. As soon as I heard about it, and it was so sweet because I opened my computer and there's I'm reading one person wrote to me, then simultaneously another email comes in, another, and then my phone begins to ring because people knew how close she and I were. And therefore they wanted to make sure. And very sweet, different friends all wanted to make sure that I was informed. So I was getting all this response, all the expression of her love coming to me from so many different people. Be sure and tell Asha. I could see people saying that. But all I could feel was how joyful. Just what a perfect ending to a really perfect life. Seva was 12 years older than I, which made her a little bit older than almost all the rest of the little clan that was the founding tribe of Ananda. And Seva was just a little more of a grown-up than the rest of us were. She had already held a really responsible job in San Francisco. She'd sort of been a person. Those of us who came in our early 20s, and I just say this just as a simple fact, I wasn't a grown-up. I was not even a person. I was just hanging out on the edge, waiting for my life to start until I met Swami and got to Ananda. And Seva had certain qualities that proved very useful. Like she knew how to work, and she knew how to work in a steady, consistent manner. And when Ananda was just almost chaos, Seva just started showing up at the office every morning at 9 and would sit and work until 5 o'clock. And it wasn't so much that we had to be in that kind of a rhythm, but we had to understand what was involved in what we were doing. And Seva had been the financial manager for an architectural firm in San Francisco. And she met Swami in 1967. Seva had a close girlfriend named Arlene, and the Swamiji was living in an apartment in San Francisco just trying to make Ananda happen. So if it was 67, he didn't really get that land until 68. So he was speaking all over the city and all over the area whenever the opportunity came. And there was this big apartment complex called North Point. And it had like a recreation room, and people could organize programs. So I don't know if Seva lived in that complex or had friends, but Swami Kriyananda, there was a speaking there, and I think Arlene was involved. I think they both went together. And Swami was going to be there talking about, San Francisco was a singles, happy city for young working professionals. So it was a young, I don't know if the word worldly is quite the right word, because San Francisco was also just exploding with spirituality. So Seva walked into that room to meet Swami. Swami said he recognized her immediately. That's how he used the words. I mean, and he didn't recognize everyone immediately. I mean, just to give you an idea of what that really meant. I met Swami at Stanford, at this strange program that was put on by this fraternity. Years later, I told Swami that's where I met him. His response to me was, "Oh, you were there?" So it's not like everybody, he felt that way, but he said about Seva, as soon as he saw her, he recognized her. He recognized her as a friend from the past and a dear friend in the present. And he also recognized the depth of her spiritual longing. And from that point, she became his friend. And in ways that I was never capable, I was too immature to understand really how to be Swamiji's friend. But she really became his friend. I have a note here. Let me see if I can just find it. I was looking through some of the things here. Yes, it is. He said, Swami said about her in 1978, now Seva had a karmic trial that she had to face, which was she had a tendency to, how would you say it, to become worried about herself. And she had a tendency to disbelieve people's affection for her. And that led her through a lot of long byways. And this was something that Swami wrote to her, spoke to her. Seva told it to me. When she was falling into a mood, that's the word I want to use. She tended to fall into moods. And then she would just feel really sad. She and I lived in another trailer just a short distance from her. And for all those 10 years, we worked together at publications. We walked over the hill from Ayodhya to where the publications building was, which is now Hansa Temple. I would walk from my trailer to hers. I would pick her up at whatever time it was. And then we would walk over the hill together. And because of her moods, I could tell by the sound of her breathing or by the sound of her sneeze what kind of a mood she was in. And then there would be times when she would just be sad, and I would just have to buoy her up. I was not inclined that way, but balanced with that, Seva's qualities were hard to describe in the sense that who she was inside of her. She became very articulate, or I should say, when she needed to be, she could be very articulate. But she joked about herself that she didn't actually have a first language. And when she would talk, she would regularly say the opposite of what she meant, because she would have words that were related to what she wanted to say, and she would just string them together in some order or another in the hope that it would communicate. Fortunately, I knew her so well and we were so close that if I had even a vague idea of the subject, I could figure out what it was that she wanted to say. And she was a little embarrassed about that quality, so if you didn't understand her right away, she would repeat the same incomprehensible statement in a slightly louder voice, which usually worked because then somehow the intuition would kick in. But every morning I'd walk over and I'd pick her up and we'd walk over to publication. I mean, rain or shine, snow or sleet, although Seva actually always owned a car, which was an incredible thing that none of the rest of us did. But we rarely used it, I mean, except to go to town or something, but we'd just walk over the hill. And then most of the weekdays, not always, but most of the weekdays at 4 o'clock, we would walk back over and we would go down to Swami's house. So Seva was often with Swami when I wasn't there, but I was rarely with Swami when Seva wasn't there. So every part of my life with Swami was also my life with Seva. And we had no secrets from each other. So I was about to read Swamiji in his effort to help her. He was constantly trying to help her through the moods. He called her Seva because one of the most powerful ways to overcome self-concern is to serve others. So he named her Seva, which means selfless service. And I remember also Lakshmi Selby was also close with Swami during those early years. And Lakshmi had been my friend since Lakshmi is the one who introduced me to Ananda and to Swami. So there was a very tight circle there. And Lakshmi once was saying to Swami, with Seva standing there, Swamiji, Seva never takes any time off. She really needs to have some more time to herself. Lakshmi is more of a reclusive person, and as her life has evolved, she's had the luxury of a great deal of seclusion and so on, after raising 4 children, I should say. But she said to Swami, tell Seva to take some time off. Swami got very stern and looked at Lakshmi and said, I know what's best for her. Just like that. And he was right, because during those years, especially whenever Seva had time to herself, her mood would sink. And so what saved her was Seva. And she would just constantly give to others, and that would keep her. But then still she would fall into these concerns. And Swami said, he said to her, it hurts me so much when you get this way, which was moody and unhappy. I love you as much as it is possible to love a personality. We have been souls together for so long. Oh, this is gonna take me down. When I think of Ananda, it is you I think of most of all. You are the one who is doing this with me, pulling it all together. So many others are just doing their own thing. We just aren't going to be together very much as the years progress. He wrote this in 1978. And it hurts me as much as it hurts you. But you have to grow up and be on your own and find God. You have to learn to feel me inside, which you do to a certain extent, but you keep wanting to just run home to Daddy, he says. You don't want to be married to me. You wouldn't be happy sitting by the fire fixing my meals. You need to be out. You have deep wisdom and great strength, and it is time you brought it out more. This was around the time that Swami made this very, very hard decision, which is he told Seva just exactly that. And he said, I would keep you by my side for the rest of your life if I thought it would be good for you. And I heard a little interview with Seva where she herself talks about this. She said, I needed to become strong on my own. She said it was just too easy for me to just go along with whatever Swami was doing, just move in the flow of his energy. She said, I needed to have it on my own. And when Swami began to do that, and he said that to her in 1978, I think a little bit later than that, he was a little bit stronger. And then in 1981, Swami himself stopped being a monk soon after he married Rosanna Golia. Seva was in charge of the monastery, and the whole monastery came apart. And I and all the others, most of the others moved away. Only Seva and a couple of the women stayed in that monastic life. But this whole 10 years of this close energy that we all have, just practically overnight, it just went away. And she was there, Seva was there. Those of us who knew her well sort of watched this long struggle take place. And it probably took at least 20 years, maybe took 25 years, in which she just, well, actually it didn't take, maybe it wasn't quite that long. It was that long until she was really free. But in 1992, Swami also wrote, we exchanged a little conversation. I said it was 95. Swami said, it's so wonderful to see Seva doing so well again. And I said, yes, it's taken a long time. And then Swami said, yes, but she hung in there. She never gave up. And that's what matters. And Seva herself in 2012, which was like just before Swami died, she wrote this beautiful blog, which I think if you go to ananda.org now, they'll post it close. Nayaswami's blog by Nayaswami Seva. It's called Learning to Love. And then she just wrote the whole story. Seva had been, and Swami actually even said that, with Jyotish, Seva had so much authority at Ananda. She was always next to Swami. She was running all the money. She was totally involved with everything. She and Jyotish were partners in what they were doing. It's for him to speak about that, not me. And then Freeman and Padma came, who were very skilled at running the money, and it was very appropriate for her to pass that over to them. So she lost that job. The monastery came apart, so that whole world disappeared for her. Swami got married and moved into another reality. Swami said to her, "This is what you need spiritually, so this is what I'm going to do for you." And suddenly, from being the center of everything, she was just way on the edge. And they went, for a time she went to Portland, and she helped get the Portland community established. You know, she worked as a waitress, and she was an assistant to what was going on. She had a semi-leadership role. She was there for a couple of years. She went to Italy for almost a year to help things get established there. And then she came back to the village. She eventually came back to the village, and the only job that was open to her was in Dr. Peter's medical clinic, where she became some kind of a clerical assistant there, a medical assistant. So she's been in a position where she was, you know, second or third in charge of the whole community. Now she gets up and goes to work, and she's a medical assistant in the medical clinic. I mean, it's perfectly good work, and her name, after all, is Seva. But everything that, all the karma of her whole life was just coming to a point, you know, she's just become insignificant if you're going to look at it from any big perspective. And then it was suggested to her that she needed counseling. This is what she writes in her blog. And she passes over it because it was in the past. But it was humiliating for her, you know, just on the deepest level. But as she said, Ananda was my whole life, and I wanted to cooperate. So she did. And of course, thank you, God, it saved her life. Because it just made her think for the first time more deeply than she, in a you know, impersonal way, from someone who she couldn't accuse of not loving her. Just, what is it that I really want in life? And she had to really ask that question, and she had to suddenly ask herself, you know, so what if I'm unimportant? My name is Seva. That's all that matters. And then it came to her, as she describes it just came to her very deeply that her only job was to love people, which is really what Swamiji had been telling her all along from the very start. You have great wisdom, and you just have to give that to people. And Seva writes, she said, but she didn't feel any love for people. But she prayed to Master and said, you love people through me. And what she says is, when Master's love started flowing through her, then she learned what real love was. Because she was able then to really, she doesn't write it because she writes very well in this, but she doesn't write it with everything. But I know her, and I know what she was saying. She could watch love being expressed. You know, see, we think we're the source of it, and we think we have it or we don't have it, and we don't know how to do it like this. But when she had nothing of her own, and she was driven to the point where she had nothing. I mean, everybody always loved her because someone in the exchanges in the last 24 hours said she was pure kindness is the phrase they use. And I thought to myself, and I can't think of a single instance when Seva was ever unkind to me. And God knows I provoked her. But she never was. She was just kind in herself. But she was self-concerned. She was just worried. She was always worried about herself. But but she was pushed to the point where she had nothing. She had nothing external that she could claim. But she realized that she was here to love, and she couldn't even claim that love. So she asked Master to run it through her. And so she began, and she said it was hard work. And she began to watch Master's love flow through her. And then she learned how to love, which is, what difference does it make what people think of me? And she writes, she said, she realized that what difference did it make if they were unkind or unhappy, or what difference did it make? She just had one job, and that was to love people. And she just started doing that. And of course, everything changed. Everything changed. And she even writes, she said, I realized people didn't hate me. And I read that and I thought, hate you, Seva, everyone loved you. I don't know anyone who didn't love you. But delusion being what it is. And she said, but that's for some reason what I had thought. And so she just looked for ways to help people and just began to look for people to love. And of course, there's always people to love. And she loved those who were, she said, unbalanced, unhappy, unkind, because Master could always do that. Master's love was always just the same. And I remember a couple of things that Swami said that were interesting. When we were all young, he said, I only see Seva as very youthful or very old. He said, I think when she finally does age, she'll just age quickly. But I don't think she ever did. Her hair went from brown to white, but I never saw that she aged. She always looked youthful. So maybe some other world he was remembering. But much more seriously, he said to her during those late 70s when he was telling her that, a big tapasya was going to start for her. He said, I see you as an old woman in one of two ways. He said, in one, you're very bitter and you're alone. And in the other, you're a radiant beacon of light. And he didn't say, what the destiny was. He just said, those two roads are in front of you. And in this little film that I saw that Ishani had made of Seva a long time ago, or not a long time ago, but I just saw it, and it was done quite recently. Seva said, it was very hard. She said, it was very hard, and I know because I watched a lot of it. It was very hard, she said. But I wouldn't hesitate to do it all again. Because she took the road that Swami saw for her. And she stands victorious for all of us. This is the fruit of a life lived for God. God bless you.